After working day and night for 3 years, David Richardson returned home to find a note on his door that revealed the biggest lie of his life, but the real shock came when he saw his daughter Emma's condition. David Richardson's old Ford pickup truck was making an unusual noise as it turned into the familiar neighborhood street. He had just returned from a 3-year tour of duty at a military base. During his time in the rugged mountains of Afghanistan, his sole focus had been on saving enough money for his 8-year-old daughter Emma. His ex-wife, Sarah, had left them when Emma was just 3 years old. Since then, David had been struggling to raise his daughter on his own. Seeing the house, his heart sank. The grass in the yard was waist-high. The painted wooden fence was coming apart, and there were no curtains on the windows. This was not the house he had left 3 years ago. Back then, everything had been neat, clean, and livable. He had left Emma in the care of his neighbor Margaret Thompson, a woman who had raised her own children and was trustworthy. David got out of the car and took the duffel bag off his shoulder. As he approached the front door, a small piece of paper caught his eye. It was a note taped to the door knocker with Scotch tape. David, Emma no longer lives here. She's not at Margaret's house either. Check Mr. Johnson's house at 2847 Pine Street. There's a lot to explain. Neighbor Kelly, his heart began to pound in his chest. Where was Emma? What had happened to Margaret? He took out his phone, but it was dead. He hadn't been able to use personal devices for 3 years, due to platform rules. Pine Street was the oldest and poorest street in the neighborhood. David had never been there before, but he knew the address. It took 10 minutes by car. The house at 2847 was a 2-story wooden structure with peeling paint. The grass was yellow, the steps were rotten, and the window panes were cracked. He rang the doorbell. He could hear the television inside, but no one answered. He rang again, louder this time. Finally, the door opened. An old, drunk-looking man appeared. "Are you Mr. Johnson?" David asked. "Who's asking?"
I'm David Richardson.
"My daughter Emma. I heard you live here." Johnson's eyes widened. "Oh, are you her father?" Yes, come in." Inside, it was dim and cluttered. Old furniture, empty beer bottles, and laundry were everywhere. David felt a tightness in his stomach. "Where's Emma?" he asked. "Upstairs, but be careful, she's been quiet lately." David climbed the stairs 3 at a time. There were 3 doors in the hallway. The first room contained only old belongings. The second was Johnson's bedroom. The third door was closed. He opened it quietly. In the corner of the room, curled up on an old bed, was a little girl. Emma. But this wasn't the cheerful child David knew. Her hair was long and tangled. Her dress was dirty and too big for her. She was holding a worn-out teddy bear. "Emma?" David whispered. The girl lifted her head. She looked at her father with large, empty eyes. She didn't seem to recognize him. "Are you my father?" Emma asked, her voice sounding incredibly old. David's eyes filled with tears. He knelt down beside the bed. "Yes, my dear, I'm your father. I'm here." Emma stood up but didn't run to hug him. She just stood there, as if she were dreaming. "I've been waiting for you for a long time," said Emma. "Aunt Margaret got sick and died. Then Mr. Johnson took me away. He said you would never come back." David's heart broke. Margaret was dead? When? Why hadn't anyone told him? "No, dear, I always planned to come back. I just went to make money for you." Emma shook her head, but there was still doubt in her eyes. David hugged her. She was so thin. "We're leaving," David said. "Right now." They went downstairs. Johnson was sitting in front of the TV. "I'm taking Emma," David said. "Hey, wait a minute. I spent money on this child. Food, shelter." David took the cash out of his pocket and placed it on the table. "Is this enough?" Johnson counted the money, shook his head. "All right, take her. She wasn't causing any trouble anyway." David hugged Emma and left the house. Emma sat in the back of the car, clutching her teddy bear tightly. "Emma, when did Aunt Margaret die?" David asked. "Last winter. She got very sick and an ambulance came. Then she never came back." "Where did you go then?" "First, Child Services came. But Mr. Johnson said he was my grandfather and could take me." He showed them a document. David furrowed his brow. Johnson wasn't Emma's grandfather. How could this be? They returned to their old house. David opened the door. The electricity was still on, but the house was empty and cold. The refrigerator was empty, and there were only a few cans in the kitchen. "Are we staying here?" Emma asked. "Yes, dear. This is our home." That night, David gave Emma a bath, found her some clean clothes and combed her hair. The girl didn't complain or cry. She just sat quietly, letting her father look at her. This worried David. Emma used to be a very talkative and energetic child. As she lay in bed, Emma asked, "Daddy, where's Mommy?" David paused. What could he say about Sarah? Your mom is far away. But you're with me now, and that's what matters. Emma nodded and closed her eyes, but David couldn't sleep. Margaret's death, Johnson's fake documents, Emma's situation, everything felt so strange. Early the next morning, Kelly visited the neighbor. Kelly was a retired teacher in her 60s.
David, I heard you're back. Did you find Emma?
Yes, but Kelly, what happened here? How did Margaret die? Kelly's face fell. Last December. Heart attack. It was very sudden. Emma was at school at the time, and when she arrived, the ambulance had already left. Child services came to take Emma, but Johnson showed up and said you had left her with him. I didn't do that. I know, but he had official documents. Emma's guardianship papers. Your signature. Everything looked so legitimate. David's blood ran cold. My signature? I never signed anything like that. I was suspicious anyway. Margaret never mentioned Johnson to me. But the documents looked official and the officials accepted them. How is that possible? Kelly paused. David, I need to tell you something. I saw Sarah last year. David's heart stopped. What? In the city at a cafe. She was with another man. They looked very happy. I saw her trying on a wedding dress. David couldn't say anything. Sarah was here? Was she getting married? I mentioned Emma to her, Kelly continued, but her face went pale. She acted like she didn't know anything and left quickly. David's mind was racing with questions. Sarah was here. She knew about Emma, but she hadn't done anything. Johnson had taken Emma with fake documents. Margaret's death had been so sudden. Kelly, could Johnson have a connection to Sarah? I don't know, but you can look into it. There might be some documents left at Margaret's house. It's still empty. When David returned home, Emma was sitting in the kitchen, staring at an empty plate. Are you hungry, dear? Emma shook her head. David opened the refrigerator, but there were only a few eggs. He made pancakes and placed them in front of Emma. Mr. Johnson never made pancakes, said Emma. He just opened cans. I'll make pancakes every day now, said David. Emma smiled for the first time. It was a very small, shy smile, but to David it was worth the world. That afternoon they went to Margaret's house. The house was indeed empty. David took the key from where he knew it was, under the flower pot. Inside it was dusty but tidy. Margaret's papers were still on her desk. Emma sat down in Margaret's old chair. Aunt Margaret used to read books to me here, she said. David rummaged through the papers. In one file, he found documents related to Emma, school records, health reports, and a fake guardianship document. It looked a lot like David's signature, but it wasn't real. There was a small note at the bottom of the document. SM, we've agreed. Keep E safe. Let me know when the money arrives. RJ. Who was SM? RJ was probably Robert Johnson. But SM? A thought struck David. Sarah Mitchell. Sarah's maiden name was Mitchell. Sarah had made a deal with Johnson and placed Emma with him. But why? To get rid of Emma. Dad, are you sad? Emma asked. David looked at his daughter. That innocent face, those big eyes. This child didn't deserve any of this. No, sweetheart. I'm just thinking. Shall we go get some ice cream? Emma's face lit up. Really? Really? At the ice cream shop, Emma asked while eating her chocolate cone. Dad, will my mom ever come back? David's heart ached. Emma was still waiting for her mother. But what would happen when she found out the truth? I don't know, sweetheart. But you're my most precious treasure. Never forget that. Emma nodded and smiled. That smile was enough for David. No matter what happened, he would protect his daughter. Whatever Sarah's plan was, David wouldn't let it happen. But first he needed to find out the truth. Where was Sarah? What deal had she made with Johnson? And was Margaret's death really natural? That night, after Emma fell asleep, David began searching for Sarah online. Soon he would discover that the truth was far more complicated and painful than he had imagined. The email chain David found would reveal not only Sarah's plan, but also the dark truth behind Margaret's death, and Emma's life was still in danger. When David saw the words Sarah Mitchell on his laptop screen, his fingers trembled. Her social media accounts were private, but her name appeared in news archives. He found an article titled Sarah Mitchell, who married real estate millionaire Richard Carston. In the photo, Sarah was a happy woman smiling in a luxurious restaurant. She didn't look like a mother who had abandoned her daughter 3 years ago. When he researched Richard Carston, he found more information. He was 56 years old, divorced, and childless. His marriage to Sarah was his second. What was interesting was an interview where Carston had openly stated that he refused to have children. "I don't want children in my life. I'm absolutely clear about that," Richard had said in an interview a year earlier. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place in David's mind. Sarah wanted to get rid of Emma because her new husband didn't want children. But how? He returned to Margaret's house in the middle of the night. This time he searched more carefully. In the bedroom he found Margaret's old computer. It wasn't password protected. Margaret wasn't tech-savvy. In the email account he found shocking things. Messages from Sarah. "Margaret, David is almost back. He must not find out that Emma isn't his daughter. Johnson has taken care of everything. You just stay quiet. 3 months ago. Margaret, if you keep talking, there will be trouble. Emma's real father is Richard. No one should know this. 2 months ago. This is my last warning, Margaret. If you open your mouth, I'll destroy you. 1 month ago." David's hand trembled. Emma wasn't his daughter, but that was impossible. Emma looked just like him. Same eye color, same hair texture. He continued reading the emails. Margaret's last message to Sarah. "Sarah, I can't take it anymore. When David returns, I'll tell him everything. Emma has the right to know the truth. You're a terrible mother." 2 days after this message, Margaret died of a heart attack. David's blood ran cold. Could this be a coincidence? He checked Margaret's emails from before her death. She hadn't mentioned any heart problems. On the contrary, her doctor's checkups had been normal. She was 68 years old but very healthy. Then he found messages from Johnson to Margaret. "I mixed the pills into her food. She'll look like she had a heart attack a few hours later. No one will suspect a thing. I'll leave town as soon as I get the money." On the day of Margaret's death, David felt like he was going to vomit. Margaret had been murdered. Johnson had killed her, and Sarah was behind it. But why? Would they go this far just to get rid of Emma? He continued his investigation. He found news about Richard Carston's assets. He had a real estate portfolio worth $200 million. But most importantly, there was information about his will. It stated that in the event of his wife's death, all his assets would go to his wife. Sarah was after a fortune, but if Emma came forward and Richard found out he had a child with Sarah, the marriage would be ruined and the money would be gone. David checked the phone records. Margaret had had a long conversation with Johnson the day before her death, but another number caught his attention. Margaret had called a lawyer a few hours before her death. He called the law office the next morning. The secretary said Margaret had made an appointment but hadn't shown up. "What was the appointment for?" David asked. "To file a case of child neglect and abuse. She said a girl had been abandoned by her mother. Her father was on military duty, and he was unaware of the situation." David's eyes filled with tears. Margaret had tried to protect Emma at the last minute, but she had been killed. He wanted to call the police immediately and report Margaret's death, but he stopped himself. He had no concrete evidence. The emails could be deleted. Johnson could disappear. He needed to gather more evidence first. He went to Emma's school and spoke to her teacher. Miss Linda Miller described the changes she had seen in Emma over the past year. She became very quiet. She used to be a very social child, but after Margaret's death she stopped talking altogether. She looked very scared when Johnson came to pick her up. What was Johnson like? Very strange. He never hugged Emma or held her hand. He was like a stranger. And once, when he came to pick her up, he was drunk. "Didn't you report that?" "I did, but Johnson showed me the guardianship papers. He was Emma's legal guardian, and said her father was on military duty." When David returned home, Emma was sitting in the garden, playing with butterflies. She looked so innocent. How could someone do such a terrible thing to such a beautiful child? "Emma, come here. I want to ask you something." Emma came over. "What's wrong, Dad? Did Aunt Margaret ever tell you anything about your mother? Where she is, what she's doing?" Emma thought for a moment. "I heard her talk on the phone once. She said I shouldn't tell you anything. And she said Richard mustn't find out. Do you know Richard?" "No, but Aunt Margaret always looked sad when she mentioned that name." David sighed. Margaret knew everything, but she was trying to protect Emma. That evening, after Emma had gone to bed, he went to Johnson's house. The house was dark, and no one was there. The neighbor said that Johnson had left 2 days earlier with a large suitcase. He was in a hurry. He threw his things in the car and left. It was very strange. Johnson had fled. But where? On his way home, an unknown number called David's phone. "Hello? Are you David Richardson?" It was a woman's voice. "Yes, who is this?" "It's Sarah." David's heart stopped. It was the first time he had heard Sarah's voice in 3 years. "Sarah. Where are you?" "That doesn't matter, David. I heard Emma is with you." "Yes, I took her. She was in a terrible state with Johnson." "Good. Because you need to take care of her. Why? Aren't you her mother? There was a long silence. David, Emma isn't your daughter. What? You can get a DNA test. Emma is my daughter and Richard's. David's world collapsed. That's impossible. Emma looks just like me. Coincidence. But it's the truth. I got pregnant with Richard, and you were focused on your work at the time. When Emma was born, I told you she was your daughter, because Richard didn't want children. So, I've been living a lie for 3 years? David, I'm sorry, but now you know the truth. Emma is not your responsibility. Emma is my daughter, David shouted. No matter who she is, I'm her father. I raised her, I loved her. David, calm down. You had Margaret killed. Johnson will confess everything. You don't know what you're talking about. Margaret was old. She had a heart attack. Your lies won't work anymore, Sarah. I'm going to the police. Don't go, David, because Emma might get hurt. This threat froze David. What do you mean? Richard is a very powerful man. Emma's presence will destroy our marriage. You understand that, don't you? The phone hung up. David was trembling. Sarah was threatening Emma. That night, he couldn't sleep. He went into Emma's room and watched his daughter. She looked so peaceful as she slept. No matter whose daughter she was now the center of David's life. The next morning, he called lawyer Jerry Walsh. Jerry was David's old friend and a family law expert. Jerry, I have an urgent matter. Can we meet today? Of course, David. What happened? David told him everything. Jerry listened carefully. David, this is a very complicated situation. First, you need to get a DNA test done. Then we'll file a court order for Emma's legal protection. But Sarah is threatening me. Then we need to go to the police as well. This is very serious. David was right. There was no turning back now. No matter what the truth was, he would protect Emma. When the DNA test results that would change David and Emma's lives forever arrived, Sarah's wedding day had already begun, but David's final surprise would shock all the guests. The DNA test results arrived 2 days later. David opened the envelope with trembling hands. He wasn't Emma's biological father. Sarah had been telling the truth, but David didn't care. Emma was his daughter, blood or no blood. When Emma came home from school, David hugged her. My darling daughter, I have something to tell you. Emma looked at him with wide eyes. What is it, Dad? You're my most precious treasure. That will never change. Emma smiled. I love you so much, Dad. David had made his decision. He would get legal custody of Emma. Lawyer Jerry Walsh prepared the necessary documents for the court proceedings. They presented Margaret's emails as evidence. They hired a private detective to find Johnson and get his statement. 2 weeks later, the detective found Johnson in Mexico. After he was arrested, he confessed everything. He admitted to killing Margaret on Sarah's orders, forging Emma's fake guardianship documents, and receiving $50,000 from Sarah. The police moved to arrest Sarah. But where was she? David searched social media and found Sarah's wedding date with Richard. They were getting married tomorrow at the most luxurious hotel in the city. Jerry, can we catch Sarah at her wedding? David, that's too risky. If Sarah sees you, she might escape. But that's the safest place she'll be. The only moment she can't escape. And Richard needs to know the truth. Jerry thought for a moment. All right, but we'll do it with police backup. On the day of the wedding, David left Emma with Kelly. Aunt Kelly, my dad has to go to an important meeting. I'll be back tonight. Emma looked worried. You're not going to leave me again, are you? David knelt down and held his daughter's hands. Never. This time it's just a few hours. I'm going to protect you. The Grand Palace Hotel's wedding hall was decorated with pink and white flowers. David was wearing a suit and had managed to get in even though he wasn't on the guest list. The hall was packed, with at least 200 people. He had seen Sarah getting ready in the bridal suite. She looked beautiful in her white wedding dress, but David didn't recognize her anymore. This woman was a murderer. When the ceremony began, David was standing in the back row. Sarah noticed David as she walked down the aisle. Her face turned pale, but she had to continue. Richard Carston was a handsome man in his 60s, with gray hair. He looked as if he were in love with Sarah. The pastor began his speech. Dear guests, today is Sarah and Richard's happy day. David waited. He was waiting for the right moment. If anyone objects to this marriage, speak now or forever hold your peace, said the pastor. David stood up. I object. The entire room fell silent. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Sir, who are you? The pastor asked. I am David Richardson. I am Sarah's former husband and Emma's father. Richard furrowed his brow. Sarah, you never told me about this man. Sarah was trembling. Richard, this is a complicated situation. David stepped forward. It's not complicated, Richard. Sarah lied to you. She has an 8-year-old daughter named Emma. That's impossible, Richard shouted. Sarah told me she couldn't have children. She hid Emma's existence because you didn't want children. Worse still, she abandoned Emma and had Margaret killed for trying to protect her. The room erupted. The guests looked at each other in shock. Sarah turned to Richard helplessly. Don't listen to him. He's crazy. David pulled documents from his pocket and held them up. Johnson's confession is here. It explains how he killed Margaret and how Sarah paid him. At that moment, police officers entered the room. The chief inspector signaled to David. Sarah Mitchell, you are under arrest for organizing the murder of Margaret Thompson and child neglect. Sarah began to collapse. No, this is a conspiracy. Richard stepped away from Sarah. You lied to me. You had a child. Richard, please. That child is not yours. But she's my daughter, said David. Emma may be your blood, but she was raised with my love. The real father is the one who loves the child. The police began to handcuff Sarah. Sarah looked at David one last time.
You've lost Emma, David. You had a DNA test done. She's not your daughter.
David smiled. You're right, Sarah. Emma isn't my daughter. She's my life, my breath, my heart. There's no stronger bond than that. As Sarah was being loaded into the police car, Richard stood there, collapsed. Where's Emma? Richard asked. She's in a safe place, and she'll stay there. Richard shook his head. I never wanted children, but now, can I meet her? David looked at Richard. The man seemed sincere, but David had to be careful. Maybe someday, but Emma needs to heal first. She's been through a lot. When David returned home, Emma and Kelly were doing a puzzle in the living room. Emma ran up to David and hugged him. Daddy, I missed you so much. I missed you too, sweetheart. Kelly looked curiously. How did it go? Sarah was arrested. Margaret's murder has been solved. Emma is safe now. Emma looked at David's face. No one can take me away from you now. Right? No one can ever separate you from me. Because you're my daughter. I chose you, I love you, I raised you. 3 months later, the court granted David full custody of Emma. Sarah was sentenced to 25 years in prison for organizing Margaret's murder. David found a new job and started working as a contractor in the city. Emma returned to school, started playing with her friends, and slowly regained her old cheerful self. One evening, Emma hugged David. Dad, I'm lucky. Why? Sweetheart, because I have a father who really loves me. Some children have biological fathers who don't love them. I'm luckier. David's eyes filled with tears. Emma was right. True love was stronger than blood. Richard called occasionally to ask about Emma, but he didn't press the issue. David respected him. A year later, David bought a small house with a big garden. Emma raised butterflies there, in memory of Margaret. Aunt Margaret would be happy, Emma said one day. I'm sure she's watching you from above, dear. Emma smiled and tried to place the butterfly on her finger. David realized in that moment that fatherhood wasn't about bringing a child into the world, but about making their world beautiful. Emma was his daughter, not just through love, but through choice, sacrifice, and struggle. And that was far more valuable than any blood bond.